They called him mad, said he was dangerous, that his words would lead to ruin, and maybe they did. But buried beneath the chaos, beneath the rage, beneath the hammer that shattered centuries of belief, Nietzsche wasn't just destroying, he was making space. Space for something new, something honest, something terrifyingly free. Now imagine him walking into a world of digital masks and collapsing meaning, where identity is fluid, truth is relative, and God is long gone, where irony is religion and self-expression is survival. He wouldn't panic, he wouldn't preach, he'd smile, because this isn't the end of the world he feared, it's the one he hoped for. Gen Z didn't read Nietzsche, they became him. Not in theory, but in instinct. They feel the void he wrote about, they breathe it, post through it, laugh through it, and still they create. From fragments, from nothing, from pain. They live in a universe he predicted, and they're doing exactly what he begged humanity to do, become the artists of their own lives. They're not lost, they're not broken, they're becoming. And Nietzsche would have loved every second of it. I've always felt it, that strange hollowness beneath. Everything they told us was sacred. The institutions, the traditions, the so-called absolute truths, crumbling. Nietzsche called it early, God is dead. Not as a celebration, but as a warning, a seismic collapse of meaning. What was once held together by divine command has now been scattered across the chaos of modern life. But here's what makes Gen Z so fascinating. They were born in the aftermath. They didn't kill God. They grew up in a world already haunted by his absence. And yet, they're not mourning. They're building, piece by piece, meme by meme, identity by identity. There's something strangely noble in their instinct to construct meaning from fragments. Aesthetic, ethical, spiritual, even if none of it's consistent. Nietzsche would have seen this not as moral confusion, but as the embryonic stage of authenticity, a refusal to obey just because someone said you must. Gen Z doesn't kneel, they remix. In a way, they're far more honest than previous generations. They don't pretend to believe in the old gods, they joke about them, mock them, replace them with absurdist totems like Shrek or SpongeBob. But under the irony, there's this aching hunger for something real, not handed down, created. And that's precisely the point. When Nietzsche shouted that God is dead, he wasn't glorifying destruction. He was making space for creators, creators of value, of worldview, of new mythologies. And look, the Gen Z timeline is flooded with them. Pages dripping with hyper-personal spirituality, dark humor next to spiritual awakening, sarcasm next to sincerity. It's chaotic, it's beautiful, it's real. They're not looking for the truth. They're becoming it, or at least trying. And maybe that's what Nietzsche would have admired most. Not the answers Gen Z gives, but the fact that they're even asking in a world where all the answers are broken, where the old gods have bled out and no one's cleaning up the mess. I see it everywhere, that quiet resistance, not loud enough to be called a revolution, not soft enough to be dismissed as apathy. It's this silent refusal to conform, to obey, to fall in line just because that's how things are. Nietzsche detested the herd. The collective sleepwalk of moral obedience, the mindless alignment with tradition, comfort, mediocrity. And Gen Z, they walk away from that, heard without even announcing it. They ghost institutions, they blur boundaries. They change pronouns like they change usernames, not out of confusion, but out of a precise understanding. Identity is not static, and neither is truth. They trust themselves more than systems, instincts more than instruction. It's unsettling for older generations who still kneel before consensus. But for Nietzsche, he would have called it honest, raw, the early steps of spiritual nobility. What's more interesting is how Gen Z doesn't seem particularly angry. They're not screaming. In the streets, They're designing, coding, curating, building micro-worlds where the rules are theirs alone. They don't try to destroy the herd, they just ignore it. Or better, they meme it into oblivion. 1,000 TikToks, each a little Molotov cocktail thrown at mass thought. It's the subtlety of it that matters. Nietzsche wasn't looking for chaos. He was looking for clarity. He wanted people to stop hiding behind we and start becoming I. And I see that in Gen Z's fierce commitment to vibe, to aesthetic, to personalized morality. It's not narcissism, it's rebellion against anonymity, a refusal to dissolve into the gray fog of normal. And no, they're not there yet. There's fear, confusion, contradiction, but that's part of it. You don't escape the herd clean. You drag some of it with you. You stumble, you post, you delete, you try again. Nietzsche wouldn't judge that process. He'd admire the courage to even begin. It's easy to misunderstand the will to power. People think it's about domination, ego, crushing others beneath your boot. But Nietzsche meant something far deeper, a kind of inner surge, a raw force. Behind every act of creation, transformation, transcendence, it's not about control, it's about becoming. And if there's any generation that embodies this inner storm, it's Gen Z, though not in the way most people think. They don't march into boardrooms or chase power in the traditional sense. Their battlefield is digital. Their weapons are design, language, niche subcultures. I watch them rebrand themselves in real time. New aesthetic, new identity, new ambition. Sometimes weekly. That's not inconsistency. That's alchemy. It's what Nietzsche would call self-overcoming, the ability to shed your skin before it fossilizes. Think about it. Gen Z doesn't just use the internet, they mold it. Curate feeds like galleries, build platforms around their personalities, negotiate influence, attention, and meaning, not with hierarchy, but with creativity, with irony, with speed. The algorithm isn't their god, it's their dragon, and they ride it like no generation before. That's the will to power digitized. There's pain too, the pressure to perform, the burnout of constant reinvention. But Nietzsche never promised joy. He promised intensity, fire, a life lived beyond comfort. And that's what this generation seems to crave, not peace, but authentic expression, even when it burns. They'll post a breakdown at 3 a.m. and drop merch at noon. Laugh through the void, sell art born from trauma. It's not dysfunction, it's metamorphosis. And yes, it's messy. But Nietzsche never wanted clean heroes, he wanted those brave enough to wrestle themselves into someone new. And in the whirlwind of content, chaos, and reinvention, Gen Z is doing just that. Surfing the edge of identity with nothing but a cracked phone and a dream. The Übermensch was never meant to be a superhero. Not some flawless demigod above the crowd. Nietzsche imagined something much harder to define, a future human, one who lives beyond good and evil, who carves their own values into the chaos, not a ruler of others, but a master of self. And, strangely, through the filters and fractures of the modern world, I see glimpses of this in Gen Z, not in perfection, but in the refusal to be boxed in the way they treat life like an experiment, like a sandbox for becoming. One day, they're spiritual witches reading Jungian tarot. The next, they're nihilist meme lords laughing at despair. And both are real, both are valid, because they don't cling to a fixed identity. They play, they test, they create themselves. And isn't that the point? Nietzsche's Übermensch doesn't follow rules. He writes them in real time. Gen Z builds identities with drag-and-drop boldness, rejecting the linear path their parents begged them to follow. Career? Maybe. Gig work? Sure. Burn it all down and move to a van with Wi-Fi? Tempting. It's not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about not betraying the self to fit inside a dying system. And even in their darkness, there's something electric. The ability to stare into the void without blinking, to meme existential dread, to dance on the edge of meaninglessness, and still find style, connection, a weird kind of joy. Nietzsche would have seen that not as weakness, but as a kind of strength born from suffering, not avoiding the abyss, but diving into it and emerging with glitter on their boots. No, they're not Übermenschen yet, but they're trying. Every rebrand, every vulnerable post, every refusal to settle for someone else's blueprint, it's not vanity, it's becoming, not better than others, just more themselves than anyone thought possible. If Nietzsche were alive today, I'm convinced he'd be scrolling through meme pages like they were underground art galleries. Because buried beneath the absurdity, the irony, the layers of inside jokes and internet dialect, there's something ancient happening, something Dionysian, raw, chaotic, unapologetically alive. Meme culture isn't just humor, it's revolt, it's ritual, it's Gen Z's version of drunken tragedy masked as comedy. The Dionysian, in Nietzsche's thought, is that primal energy, irrational, ecstatic, borderless. It's the scream beneath the mask, the meltdown behind the filter, and that's what memes have become, digital expressions of collective madness, joy, pain, and resistance. A way to survive absurdity by laughing directly at it, not as escape, but as catharsis, as art, as blood ritual in pixel form. A meme about spiraling depression. It gets 1 million likes, not because it's funny, but because it touches something. Real. It says, I see you in a language older than reason. Gen Z uses these fragments the way ancient Greeks used myth, to make chaos bearable, to give form to the formless. It's not nihilism. It's Dionysian affirmation, the choice to dance in the ruins. And what makes it even more Nietzschean is the refusal to explain. These aren't TED Talks. They're memes with a punchline only 5 people truly understand. That's the point. Truth isn't universal. It's perspectival. Meaning isn't handed down. It's conjured in dark corners of Discord servers and private Instagram stories. It's alive, unstable, beautiful. So while the world collapses under the weight of its own seriousness, Gen Z shitposts. And in doing so, they keep the Dionysian flame burning, not in temples, but in timelines. A chaotic art form for a chaotic age. And maybe, just maybe, it's keeping them sane. Imagine living the same moment over and over. Every mistake, every tweet, every bad take, looping eternally. Nietzsche called it the eternal recurrence. A brutal idea, not a metaphor. He meant it literally. What if you had to relive your life again and again, exactly as it happened? Would you say yes, or would you scream? Now think about Gen Z, think about cancel culture. Digital memory doesn't forget. The internet is eternal recurrence, and Gen Z was born inside it. Every word, every video, every impulsive comment lives forever. Screenshots are the new karmic records. There is no clean slate, no graceful decay of memory, just infinite playback. And yet, somehow, they keep showing up. They keep posting. They dare to be seen. That's more Nietzschean than we like to admit, because to say yes to recurrence, even in humiliation, even in shame, is to choose life. Sure, cancel culture can be vicious. It often mimics the moral absolutism Nietzsche despised, a herd frenzy masked as justice. But Gen Z isn't naive about it. They're hyper-aware. They make fun of it, satirize it, dissect it in real time. They know they're living in a panopticon, and yet they perform anyway. That's not cowardice, that's courage, tragic, poetic courage. Nietzsche would have hated the mob, but admired the individual who stands in its path, the one who gets up again, reinvented, defiant, the one who lets the internet crucify their old self and then returns with dyed hair and a new SoundCloud drop. That's the Übermensch impulse. Not just to survive judgment, but to transcend it by becoming unrecognizable. And so, While older generations fear cancel culture like it's cultural death, Gen Z plays in its ashes. They laugh at their own destruction. They meme their own mistakes, and in doing so, they embrace recurrence, not as punishment, but as the price of becoming real in a world that wants them to be fake. There's something beautifully blasphemous about how Gen Z treats identity. It's not fixed, it's not sacred. It shifts, morphs, flickers like a hologram depending on the room, the mood, the platform, and this refusal to be one thing forever. It echoes something deep in Nietzsche's thought, perspectivism. The idea that there is no single objective truth, only points of view, each shaped by will, power, pain, and experience. Most people misread Nietzsche as a man obsessed with absolutes. He wasn't. He saw through them. He knew how dangerous it was to freeze identity into stone, to say, "This is who I am," and never dare to move. But Gen Z, they don't even pretend to be statues. They're shapeshifters, and not out of confusion, out of necessity, out of a dark wisdom that in a fractured world, the most honest thing you can do is stay fluid. Pronouns change, labels dissolve, new ones emerge. It's not a trend, it's an existential experiment, a living rejection of categories designed to control. Nietzsche would have called this not weakness, but strength, the strength to unchain oneself from old definitions, to say, "I will not be trapped inside your language." And yes, it terrifies people, especially those addicted to certainty. They scream about biology, about tradition, about the natural order. But Nietzsche didn't worship nature. He worshipped becoming, movement, force. And Gen Z? They're in motion, not always forward, not always clean, but alive, God, so alive. Even their fashion speaks in Nietzschean tongues, one day ethereal goth, the next normcore absurdism. No message, no allegiance, just play, just power, just the joy of refusing to be pinned down. It's not about being right. It's about being real enough to shift when the self demands it, and in that refusal to settle, to be captured, to be defined, they embody something ancient, something dangerous, something free. Perspectivism, not as a theory, but as a lifestyle. There's a heaviness in Gen Z, and I felt it, not just in the memes, not just in the late-night posts about anxiety or depersonalization. It's deeper, quieter, like a low hum of despair beneath every scroll. Nietzsche would have recognized it immediately. Nihilism, the terrifying moment when all the old values collapse and nothing rises to replace them. Not depression as an illness, but as a symptom of philosophical vertigo. You can't sell hope to a generation that's seen the world burning since childhood. You can't preach purpose to kids raised on climate collapse, political absurdity, and algorithms mining their attention for profit. So they ask, what's the point? And here's the twist. Nietzsche didn't see that question as defeat. He saw it as the beginning of real strength. See, the danger of nihilism isn't that life has no meaning. It's that we might stop trying to create one. But Gen Z hasn't stopped. They're just tired of faking it. They're done pretending that success or stability or God will fill the hole. So they build micro-meanings, communities, aesthetics, playlists, projects, even inside jokes that become sacred, meaning not as truth, but as art. And the vulnerability, it's stunning. They say things out loud that Nietzsche only hinted at in riddles. I feel like nothing's real. I don't know who I am. I'm so tired of existing. It's brutal, but it's honest. It's the kind of honesty Nietzsche demanded, to look into the abyss without flinching, to name the darkness, to speak the unspeakable, and somehow from that rawness something new begins. Not the old comfort of religion, not the shiny lie of productivity, but a quieter rebellion, showing up anyway, laughing anyway, creating anyway. It's not optimism, it's something better, it's defiance. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first step out of the void. When Nietzsche declared that we must become gods, he didn't mean it as arrogance, he meant it as a responsibility. If the old values are dead, someone has to forge new ones, not inherited, not imposed, created. And that's exactly where Gen Z finds itself now, staring into the shattered mirror of modernity, holding the pieces, bleeding from the edges, but still trying to make something beautiful out of it. They don't trust the system, because they've seen it glitch too, many times. The church lied, the school lied, the economy collapsed, the politicians sold them out for likes and lobbyists. So Gen Z stopped waiting for meaning to be delivered. They started building their own, piece by piece, value by value, sometimes from rage, sometimes from love, always from truth. You can see it in their art, haunting, glitchy, sacred in its weirdness. You see it in their ethics, radically inclusive, defiantly kind, suspicious of all power. You see it in how they treat mental health, not as shame, but as reality. They're not interested in being good, they want to be real, and in Nietzsche's world, that's the beginning of nobility. Of course, it's fragile. Of course, it contradicts itself, but that's what happens when you create in the ruins. There are no clean lines, no commandments from above, just raw experience turned into something that resembles a value, not for everyone, but for them. And that's enough. That's more than enough. So yes, Nietzsche would have loved Gen Z, not because they're perfect, but because they're trying in a world that rewards numbness. They don't accept the lie. They don't flee the chaos. They live in it. They remix it. They build meaning like graffiti, temporary, defiant, absolutely alive. And in doing so, they honor his deepest dream, that we might become the artists of our own existence. Let them say, Gen Z is weak. Let them mock the chaos, the irony, the breakdowns posted in 4K. Nietzsche would have said, they are closer to truth than all your polished lies. They are not here to fit in. They are here to forge new gods in the ashes of the old. If one line survives from this reflection, let it be this. They don't accept the lie. They live in the chaos, and they create meaning like graffiti, temporary, defiant, absolutely alive.